No. Now works.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. That was a great morning so far. It's only just beginning, though. So, we have our next speaker here, Stephen Rinn, who's taken a long journey from doing property valuations in Galway to discovering the work of Michael O'Connor, which has become quite a sort of rabbit hole, I think, for him. Michael O'Connor was an amazing Celtic illuminator and did commissions for JFK and other people. And he's going to tell us all about that, so I'm not allowed to say that. He's not that well known, but he's going to be quite soon, I think, if Stephen has his way. And his works are being collected to be shown in the Kerry Writers Museum in Listowel. And he's here to tell us the story so far. But there's something special going to happen first, because actually Michael O'Connor created a work called St. Patrick's Breastplate, which is just sitting down here. And this is going to be presented by Michael's son, Father Brendan O'Connor, who's here. Welcome, Father O'Connor. And thank you very much for coming. And this is going to be presented to the centre to display, which is wonderful. And you can see the wonderful artwork of Michael O'Connor. And it's going to be put up in the gallery later on. So thank you very much for coming and presenting this. And we're looking forward to finding out a lot more about your father. So this is Dr. Tim Campbell, as you've met, and he's going to receive it on behalf of the centre.
A place for it because, of course, St. Patrick's buried only next door. There you go. It's a wonderful piece of work.
The floor is yours.
Okay. All right, I'm not using that microphone. Finding Michael O'Connor. Here we go. And like I said, I could actually probably speak an hour on this slide alone. But you can see he was a trained architect. And he obviously had access to the Book of Kells, which was certainly to his benefit, and you wouldn't get anything like the access these days. Now, excuse me. In 2019, I found a file in my father's office. It was a file I hadn't come across. It was a file I hadn't been informed about. And it was an extraordinary revelation to me. Now, what I saw first in this file were these. What you have here is the letter P. Then you had some zoomorphics, and I'm not quite sure what this is, but I'm sure Donncha McGowan probably knows.
Letter A.
Is it? Okay, well that goes back to that then. I don't see it there, but perhaps that's it. And I had nowhere else to put that particular photograph, so I put it on the very first slide. Anyhow, let's go on. Now, and then we have the letter N, which for a long time I thought was the letter H. And you can see the brilliance of them. They're fantastic in terms of illumination. They use a lot of gold leaf, but they're bright, shiny, and they're almost like they were done yesterday. Even though they were done prior to 1969. These particular pieces were probably completed between 65 and 69. They happened to be on the desk when he died. And if we go back here, we can see he died at 55 years old, 1913 to 1969. This is a little bit of a Back to the Future talk. It's certainly been a Back to the Future experience for me, because I found the file in 2019. It deals with works that were prior to 1969, and then finding or discovering works that weren't known can be anything from 1958 to 1968, and you're going back and you're going forward and you're going back and you're going forward, and you're seeing how his work is progressing. And we'll get there. Anyhow, to somebody who wasn't interested in Celtic art, or at least I had certainly known about Celtic art. My father had brought me out on outings. I had seen the Churro stone, but I never took an interest in it. When I saw just the luminosity of these pieces, the first few that I pulled out of the file, I suddenly fell in love. And it is a love story, this whole thing. It's a love story of discovering Celtic art, but it's also a love story of discovering research. Now, I've done my own research in different fields. I never loved it until now, until I've discovered that when perhaps it's just this particular story, but I absolutely love doing the research for this, because it brings me in contact with people who are also unaware of what I'm looking for, but eventually might find it, and they're as delighted as I am. Now, we'll go on to who they are later on in the talk. We have another piece here, and again, Stephen made a mistake, and I hold my hand up for the guts of a year and a half. I had this vertical, and I thought it was a letter P, and I was assured by somebody else that no, it's actually the wrong way around, and it's a letter Z. As you can see clearly, it's a Z. I wasn't looking for that, but if you turn it this way, you get a P, and it almost looks like an L as well, you know. I wasn't quite sure, and I was a little bit too afraid to ask anybody, because you don't want to end up looking stupid, you know. But I tell you, after a year and a half and you're still calling it a P, you end up looking stupid. So now, I don't know how O'Connor did it, but he almost came up with what's the material that shines at night? This type of thing. And it's luminous. And there's a brightness to it and a beautifulness. And it isn't evident on a screen like this. But if you would see a good photograph of it, or see it in reality, you'll appreciate what I'm talking about. Here we have the letter, which is quite obviously an M, and this was my first encounter with O'Connor doing an anthropomorphic figure, which is that fellow up there, and he looks very Book of Kells like. I don't think O'Connor did as much with this piece in terms of interpretation than he did with other pieces. He certainly did interpretation on this piece on the Z. I think this is more imitation. You know, I could be proved wrong after this talk, of course. Now, we'll come to another Stephen mistake. This one here, for another year and a half, I assumed was the letter G, and it isn't. It's the letter Q. Now, you have all your different patterns in here. I'm sure Michael Carroll will be well able to tell us all about the key patterns there. And here we have the alphabet. Now, I'm not quite sure it's the Irish alphabet. I have an idea it's the Latin alphabet, or I haven't really gone into much in this, but you have A, B, C, D, E, F, G. H, which there's no H in the Irish alphabet, of course, it's a bool tap. H, L, M, N, I think is the O, P, and the Q, which of course looks like a G. I have no idea what this is and have yet to find anybody who does. And then you go on to your R, S, T, U, V, and X and Z, obviously missing a few letters, such as the H, I, J. There's no J in it, you know. There's no Y in it, things like that. So I've yet to determine exactly what alphabet it is. I should know at this stage, but I don't. This is a beautiful piece, and this came out of the file. So if you could imagine picking up this stuff, and the first three photos you see are those letters that we had in the second slide, and then you start to come on to this, you really become taken in. Here we have, and it's not a number 6 or a letter A, which I thought for a long time it was. This is actually what's called ampersand. It's that squiggle that means and. This is an O'Connor version, and I have put in a Book of Kells version just to demonstrate where O'Connor got his influence from, but also to demonstrate how he built upon it. I mean, it's a fabulous piece of work, and it's a wonderful piece of work, but you can see how O'Connor just elaborated everything that he came across. So his whole modus operandi was really interpretation rather than imitation, even though he did take the baseline as what he found in Lindisfarne, Kells, and Durrow. Now, going to give you a little light relief, and unfortunately, due to technical errors, the music that comes with this video is gone, so it's a silent video. So I might put my own music with it. I can either do that or a jig, and I can't do a jig. I can't do music either, but it's a 20-second video. Roll it there, Roisin. Not Roisin, but how are we going there? It was playing earlier. Maybe click it once. Do you want? Oh, hold on. We'll just move on. Now, this is a promotional video from the Kerry Writers Museum for some of these. Why is it stopped? Am I clicking something that I shouldn't be clicking, or are you? Okay. You'll just get an essence of the luminosity here, and to give a little bit of music, diddly-eye-lee-loo-lee-lee-lee-loo. But it was meant to be Bjork playing, but I can't do Bjork. You know, so that's my best impression of Bjork. You can get an idea of how vivid these pieces are. And to my base nature, it certainly appealed. The bright colours, Now, there we go, on to the next slide. Now, I think what are probably the two most important pieces in the file that was found are these, because essentially it demonstrates how he operated, how he came to end up with his pieces of art. Here particularly, you can see how he coloured one section, went across, coloured another section, came back, went across. You know, you can see it. He didn't just work around in clockwise or anti-clockwise format, and obviously put on his gold leaf before he was finished his colouring. And he went straight from a red ink undercolour to essentially what would be the finished product. Now, I've been told by others that that's unusual, and it might open up a discussion on how it was done in earlier manuscripts. Of course, this was the 1960s. This would have been on his desk when he died. Whatever work he was working on, he literally left and became sick, stopped his work. 3 months later, he had died. So what we're looking at here are probably the last pieces that he had done anything with. You can see where he had pencil here, where he gives just a very rough outline of what he's going to do in there. I suppose it's just a matter of scale, what he can fit in there. They're well worth exhibiting come the exhibit, even though they're unfinished pieces. I think the beauty in them is that they are unfinished. Now, if ever to get somebody hooked into something, sometimes it just needs a few words. And what we have here is a piece of an article, or a section of an article that was written by my father in 1972 in an American journal, and mentions O'Connor. The piece wasn't on O'Connor, but does mention O'Connor. And what we have here is just an example, and it is the letter from Maurice Friedberg to the President of Ireland on his inauguration in '76. And I'm going to explain that. Okay, now let's go first to the letter. There were a number of letters, back and forwards between a man called Maurice Friedberg and my father, because in 1969, when O'Connor died, his wife had given these pieces to Friedberg and my father, Etienne Ryn, and had asked them to do something with them. She didn't know what to do, obviously. And between the two of them, they gave themselves 2 charges from the file. And it's evident from some of the letters between them. I'm not going to display all the letters. But the first charge was to find a home for these pieces. Obviously, they should go somewhere. They're worthy of display, and they need to be somewhere. The second charge was to elevate his work. Michael O'Connor worked, and the bulk of his work was, I suppose, 56 to 68, 69, and he just fell in a crack where there wasn't a lot of public appetite for Celtic art. We were post-Celtic revival. There was an awful lot of third-rate stuff that had come out in the 30s, and I think that dampened the public enthusiasm for the art form. In this article, it is mentioned, and I just want to go through a line or two here. Nonetheless, should Laur na Hashari ever be bound as a single book, then his illuminated breastplate of St. Patrick and his Éamon de Valera, President of Ireland, could fittingly be incorporated to fill up 2 major gaps in the book. That's an incredibly important line, because at the time, I heard of Laur na Hashari, and I knew what it was. And the thought that I was handling something that was by a person who was worthy of Laur na Hashari inclusion in Laur na Hashari sort of said, there's more out there. And there was more out there. But also, the Éamon de Valera, President of Ireland, a piece, I was thinking, well, I've got that alphabet here. I mean, imagine what he did for the President of Ireland if he did the alphabet just for his own benefit. And therefore, there was no turning back. I literally said, I have to now go and find out what this is all about. This was October 2019. My first email to anybody on the subject was 19th of October 2019. I think it was to Michelle Brown, who's not here, but is an expert on Lindisfarne. And I said, Michelle, you know, you remember me from my father? And she did. And I said, any chance you heard of this fella, what do I do with it? Because within this file, there was no information on O'Connor. There was no telephone number, address where he lived, whether he was married, whether he had children. There was no information anywhere. And there was no Google information, nothing at all out there. There were an awful lot of Michael O'Connors, but nothing on this fellow. Anyhow, so I sunk my teeth into it and I said, right, I'm going to do this. And the date, 19th of October, for my first email is quite important, actually, because I know there was a time frame between when I found this file in early October and the 19th of October when I made my first email on the subject. I'd been Googling for 3 weeks, and 3 weeks prior to the 19th of October 2019, Michael O'Connor's wife had died. Anyway, so I went and I spoke with my mother and I said, you know, Ma'am, this was down in Dad's library. And she said, oh yeah, I heard of Michael O'Connor. She didn't know him. But she said, he did a piece for our wedding. So off she goes off to the wall, comes back with this. And that's quite a magnificent piece. Here you can see Etienne Ryn, August Aideen Lucas. It's a papal blessing for their wedding in 1967. It's a particularly good piece. I don't have the time to show you any more detail than that, unfortunately. And so now we're going to start off in the search for who on earth is Michael O'Connor. 3 weeks of Googling is not a search. I thought it was, but it isn't. And what we have here is, in the previous letters, and the letter to the President of Ireland, Maurice Friedberg had explained that O'Connor was practically unknown, save to a handful of people. And there wasn't much known about him. And Maurice Friedberg thought he was under 45 years of age. And yet Maurice Friedberg had spent 20 years working with him. Didn't know anything about him. But this was the nature of O'Connor. He didn't say a lot about himself. I had found this in another part of the library. And this led to opening a few doors. Actually, it opened the floodgates, to be fair. Because here we have Michael O'Crohor, which is Michael O'Connor, and Brian McMahon, which is Brian McMahon. Well, at least Brian McMahon, who I didn't know anything about at the time, I did Google. I did find out he was a writer. He was from Listowel in County Kerry. And I was well used to making cold calls at this stage. We're used to wild emails to O'Connors, or has anybody heard of this fellow? So I Googled Brian McMahon, found out he had some children who were still alive, and one of them was Owen McMahon, who runs the solicitors down in Limerick. I rang Owen, and I said, Owen, did you ever hear of a guy called Michael O'Connor? And he said, yeah, I think there was a doctor down in Listowel called Michael O'Connor who used to live in what is now the Kerry Writers' Museum. And I said, did he have a son then called Michael O'Connor? Yeah, I think he did. And did he ever collaborate with your father? I think maybe he did. You see, this is the interest that children give in their father's works. They don't necessarily give a lot, you know. So he said, yeah, I think he did, you know. So now I knew where I was talking about. And he did mention that the building where he lived, and is the building that O'Connor was born into, is now the Kerry Writers' Museum. So the first charge from the file is now completed. This is going to be his home. It has to be his home. It's the Kerry Writers' Museum. They have to display, they've got museum status, give it to them. You think the job is done when that happens. But, and he said, that man said, oh, I think I have a program for an opening of a GA pitch in 1960 down in Listowel that O'Connor did the artwork for. And he says, oh yeah, okay. And he looked it up and he gave me this quote that O'Connor, there's a whole page about the artist, about the artist who did the cover. And this is all Michael O'Connor gave them. I had the good fortune to be born in Listowel, and that, I think about, covers everything. Anything after that is anticlimax. Now, if you try and find a man called Michael O'Connor, and that's as much information as he's given out, I mean, I didn't like his use of the word anticlimax either. I mean, he had a few children. Yeah. But here we go. Then that opened the floodgates, because then I discovered he did have children, and 2 of them are alive. One of them is here tonight, Father Brendan O'Connor. Father Brendan was keeping his family heirloom, which is called the breastplate of St. Patrick's. It's the original of the copy that's now being given to the St. Patrick's Centre, and it is arguably the magnum opus of O'Connor. Arguably, I say. It's a single piece, so you could probably say it is, but I might dispute that. We have another video, if we can give it a go, please. No music, again, technical issues. Diddly-eyed, lee-loo-lee-lee-lee-dum. There you go. Well, you see, you have to do something for TikTok. I think the music to this was Kate Bush running up that hill, you know, so. I can't do Kate Bush either, never mind Bjork, so. It looks fantastic. Anyhow, bit of light relief there for you. So that opened up the O'Connor extended clan. And your niece, Father Brendan, has this piece. It's a piece that was commissioned by Truman Limited in Dublin for the Brazen Head, which is one of the oldest pubs in Ireland. I think it's the oldest licensed pub in Ireland. And it was given in, I can't remember what year it was, but it was given. And then there was a large flood in the River Liffey. And this thing was obviously stored on the wall in a basement or somewhere. It got some water damage, and a replacement was made. I haven't found the replacement yet, but the one connection that I can find to the Brazen Head is that what's his name? Owen Hand, yes, the former Irish soccer manager, was born into that pub. And the Miss McHugh mentioned here, who was over 90 years of age, she was his grandaunt. So we keep going. These pieces are ancillary pieces that were given by the extended family of the O'Connor family. And then I thought that the collection that was now going to be donated to the Kerry Writers Museum, along with this, along with the breastplate, along with the a version of the last one we saw there, the Brazen Head, that this was a decent collection. And I thought the job was done. But then a fellow from Listowel, Dave O'Sullivan, decided to start looking up the newspapers, and he had this facility, which I didn't have, and the newspapers just brought it all out, to be fair. At the time, we discovered that he had designed signs for the entry into Listowel. This is a particularly interesting story. I don't know if any of you have heard of Blind Boy Boathouse, but I'm sure a few of you have. This is where O'Connor was commissioned to design the carpet for the VIP lounge in Shannon Airport. In 1990, it was being thrown out. And Blind Boy Boathouse's father had saved it from the skip, brought it home and relaid it in his front sitting room. Now, Blind Boy Boathouse runs a podcast with 250,000 people listening, and he wears a plastic bag over his head. So, you know, it's... Here is a piece I'm still looking for. It's a version of Public na hÉireann, and it was for the 1966 commemorations of the 1916 Rising. And here's where the Jewish community in Ireland are handing De Valera what's called the Book of Honour. And it brings back to the article that my father did in 1972 and misnamed what I was looking for. He called it Eamon De Valera, President of Ireland, not the Book of Honour. So I was looking for this piece that was a one-off piece called Eamon De Valera, President of Ireland. Didn't exist, will never exist. Now, we'll get on to the Book of Honour in a minute. This is another piece of a newspaper clipping that opened up information on what this was. We hadn't worked out what it was. We understood it was Libris and donor and all sorts of things. But this is a bookplate that was commissioned by Eamon de Valera himself. It was put into a book by Sir William Rowan Hamilton called Element of Quaternons, because de Valera was a mathematician. And this is the bookplate that's in that book in TCD Library. And the deal was that you put in your bookplate, you give a donation, and with the donations they built the new TCD Library at the time in the late 60s. And O'Connor did the original. The original is still in situ in that book, and every other one was a copy of the O'Connor's original. Now, I'm sorry I don't have a better photo of this, but this demonstrates, not particularly well in this photograph, but O'Connor's colouring. Absolutely beautiful, especially this is a blue hue. It's very hard to explain it when it doesn't show it like on the screen as you want to see it. But this was a commission in 1958 given to the Listowel races for a centenary of their Listowel races. And they didn't have a clubhouse at the time, or they didn't have an office. So it was brought home to the chairman's house, put up on the wall, and taken down in 2020 when I found out about it. And we have it now, we have it for display. It's currently in conservation. Now, going back to the De Valera Book of Honour, and there's a theme here that I haven't even mentioned the word, I think. At least I should have mentioned it a lot more. The word of discovery. Everything has been, I'm discovering Celtic art. You know, I'm discovering Michael O'Connor, that's one thing. But this thing is a 31-page manuscript that has lain in archives for 50 years and hadn't been taken out once. The archivists knew it was there. They didn't know what it was, but it was there. I discovered it last December. And the word discovery is actually appropriate here, a rediscovery, you know, because people weren't taking it out of archives to have a look at it because it didn't relate to the political life of De Valera. It didn't relate to 1916. It didn't relate to a whole host of things. So nobody's going to go looking for a Celtic manuscript or an illuminated manuscript in De Valera's archives in UCD. It sat there since the early 70s, or the mid-70s. And O'Connor designed it all. You can see here he was an expert calligrapher. I mean, he really was. You know, but going on to the Celtic art, that's an E de V for Eamon de Valera. Here you have, he designed a logo. It's a lovely leather bound in a specially made box, 31 page. I'm not going to go through all 31 pages, but I'm going to give you the important ones. This is the design he came up with. I haven't seen this anywhere before, and nobody has explained to me that it's a copy of anything else. I don't think it is. I think it's an original by himself. I mean, obviously he drew inspiration from somewhere. And he finishes off the book with this particular item. And I think that was perhaps his sign-off, because I found it in a second book. And I'll show you that a little bit later. It's a nice little sign-off. But you can see design and presentation, Maurice Friedberg, and illuminated and calligraphy, Mem A. O'Connor, Dublin, 14. The most important page in that manuscript, I suggest, is this. It's one where you need to trawl over with a magnifying glass to have a look at it, really. You can see, for scale, I've put the pencil there. It's not because I completed the artwork myself, but it just, even from a distance, and even when you don't get to examine the detail, you can appreciate that an awful lot went into that. An awful lot of thought, an awful lot of imagination. The Book of Honour was commissioned on the occasion of the naming of a forest in Israel. 5 minutes? Okay. Now, we go on to a second book that was found. It's called the Golden Book. It was a book that people were given they would give contributions and their names would go in it. Okay? O'Connor was commissioned for Liverpool Cathedral to design this book. You can see it's beautiful. I mean, and that there is obviously that there, it's a closure. But you can see he was talented. He knew how to fill a space. And particularly interesting is up around here. It's, you know, he really did fill spaces, and he knew how to. He didn't do that. He didn't do the painting, if you like. But here you have a bit of Michael O'Carroll's key pattern. I don't know if you've seen anything like that before, Michael. And here you have anthropomorphic figures. No, and there are a few pages in this. This particular, this is Three Candles Press from Cork, who obviously were commissioned in the first place to do it, and they got on to Michael O'Connor. So you have Colm O'Loughlin, who's a very famous, very well-known publisher and owner of Three Candles Press at the time, and is widely published himself, as far as I know. Here you have a lot of key pattern down the side, and a lot of intricate work here. Now, there are other pieces out there that I know exist because they mention them in various places, but I haven't got to finding them yet. There's the Isaac Herzog Book of Honour. Isaac Herzog was the first chief rabbi of Ireland, and the Jewish community commissioned the Book of Honour for him. His son was Chaim Herzog, who's the president of Israel, and his grandson is Isaac Herzog, the current president of Israel. And the only descendant that I can contact to get that book is the president of Israel. And I was told, don't, he's going to be busy. I said, no, he's not. No, he'd take my call, and he did. And I've had multiple contacts with him over the phone, and he's as enthusiastic about finding that Book of Honour as I am. And it's wonderful because he's virtually my assistant now. You know? Anyhow, then you have Robert Briscoe Book of Honour, almost found. I know it's in an attic. It's in the attic of a 90-year-old lady. She hasn't anybody to go up into the attic yet, and I won't offer to do it myself because I don't really know the lady, but she does have nephews and nieces that will come over at some stage, I'm assured. And then there's a Professor Leonard Abrahamson Book of Honour, which if it's anything like the De Valera Book of Honour, it's going to be another magnificent find, but I think we might have found a broken piece of it. And it might have been a case of all pages were cut up to give out to people to put up on their walls. So they're somewhere. The proclamation for 1966 commemorations of the 1916 Rising. I've already dealt with that in the previous thing. Now, he did a prayer scroll for JFK on the visit of JFK to Ireland in 1963. And it was a prayer by Saint Francis that was, "Oh Lord, let me be an instrument of thy faith." In 1967, there was the first visit of Pope Paul VI to America. It was a one-day visit, and it was a one-day visit to the United Nations where he was going to speak on peace. And it was because there was a conflict between India and Pakistan at the time. They were breaking up and Pakistan was being formed. And the Irish government gave him, for the occasion, the same prayer as what JFK was given years earlier. "Oh Lord, make me an instrument of thy peace." It was very appropriate. I haven't found it yet because Vatican archives don't like me anymore. I've tried. They said, no. Before Pope Pius II or Pope Pius the whatever, we can't open the archives. Or afterwards, we can't open the archives. But O'Connor did pieces for two popes. He did pieces for presidents. He was commissioned by presidents. He did a piece for Al Nasser of Egypt. I haven't yet got on to even thinking about looking for that one. He did Christmas cards by Oriel Press. I'm going to put a shout out for those because they may be around, they may not. The VIP carpet lounge, VIP lounge carpet for Shannon Airport I dealt with, and he did a piece for Lord Ivy for the Guinness bicentennial celebrations. So all his commissions were at the very top, really, and as a result, I'd like to thank the following people. Sorry. Thank you very much. Sorry, Mike. Sorry, Mike. Now, questions later.
Thank you very much, Stephen. That was perfect timing. Now what we'll do, actually, we'll have our questions this afternoon after David's talk, because we've allowed a bit of time for that. So what we'll do now is we'll move on and that was fascinating, and what a discovery. I'm looking forward to hearing a lot more about Michael O'Connor. So finally this morning, or this afternoon now, we have Hamish Burgess. Now you've met him this morning, introducing Courtney Davis, and you may have read about him in the papers, because he was here a week ago, and he did a great interview, and we did some coverage to publicise the conference. It was very successful. And so he's from a Scottish family from Aberdeenshire, but he lived in Kent and Cornwall, and I think living in Cornwall got him into surfing, and of course surfing leads you to Hawaii, obviously. And he's been in Hawaii, and he's been promoting Celtic culture there for almost a quarter of a century. And he runs the Maui Celtic radio show. He's a bagpiper, a surfer, a photographer, travelled widely with the Irish Rovers, and he's travelled widely all over Europe exploring Celtic sites and art. He's been influenced, as he said earlier, by Courtney Davis and Jim Fitzpatrick, Aidan Meehan, and of course the famous George Bain. So he's going to take us on a whirlwind trip through his influences and all his original artwork inspired by Celtic art. So welcome, Hamish.
Aloha, folks. Which mic do I use? Just my own one, or that? Yeah. Okay. Aloha. That means hello. It also means goodbye and love in Hawaiian. I've been in Hawaii 25 years, and yeah, I think Mike said most of it, so I'm just going to rip into this. I'm going to go through a few of them a little bit quickly at the beginning, and then I'll probably slow down. So storytelling's been around forever. It's part of the human condition. The Druids were second only in ancient Celtic culture to the kings and queens and chiefs. And so it's always been within the Celtic art. And one of the earliest examples I can come up with is the Gundestrup cauldron, which was found in Denmark, probably commissioned. If anybody else can enlighten me on any of this later, please do so. And lots of Celtic mythology, depiction of Cernunnos there, and various beasts. But they think it might be Thracian workmanship, so commissioned by possibly the Gauls or somebody like that, and ended up somehow in Denmark. Then we got the Pictish standing stones with the ancient Pictish symbols, and I know there's at least one person in the room that can illuminate us more on that one. And so the early ones were just the Pictish symbols. Were they boundary markers? Were they clan markers? Were they gravestones, or all of the above? Possibly coloured, who knows? That's from one of the historic Scotland plaques on site at, in Veruri. And a little bit unusual. In fact, it's got some Ogham writing on it there. Continuing into the second phase of those stones, massive amounts of storytelling. Picture symbols at the top there, then a battle scene with cavalry and infantry, and I believe that was a battle of Nectansmere, which was between the Picts and the Northumbrians. But a lot of storytelling going on with the battle scene, but very interesting down in the corner, what appears to be a dying Northumbrian soldier being pecked by a raven. So there's definitely a load of stuff going on in the Pictish stones. Quite often they had scenes, Pictish scenes on one side, but with the coming of Christianity, they were fantastically carved cross slabs on the other side, and they were shaped as opposed to the earlier ones. So you've got spirals, key patterns, knotwork, zoomorphic animals, all kinds of stuff going on there. And as they went on, they got more elaborate. That was the Hilton of Cadboll stone, which is in the National Museum in Scotland. But that's a reconstruction by Barry Grove that is on site out there. And that's the back side of the original one in the National Museum. Again, with a hunting scene, and and you've got an aristocratic lady there riding side saddle, and you can't see it in this, but she's wearing a penannular brooch of some distinction, and then you've got some trumpeters and a bunch of hunters there. So a pretty serious scene going on right there. And the bottom of that stone was broken, and they've reconstructed it there, as did George Bain in his book. And that actually kind of inspired me to do a piece there, which was for an art show in Maui called Red. And I managed to get in quite a lot of different shades of red. There's nothing in there that isn't a shade of red. Even the black and the white is the black, if you shine a light on it, you can see a little bit of red in there, kind of like a pint of Guinness. And then, of course, you come to the Lindisfarne Gospels and the Book of Kells, storytelling going on there from the Bible. That was the Virgin and Child picture. And the four evangelists, so Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, represented, and they were many times represented throughout the book. I've studied it a few times, actually. Somebody bought me a facsimile, not the crazy expensive facsimile, but the in-between kind of one. So I've been through it 3 times. And then, of course, the Jesus page. And then the high crosses in Ireland, the stonemasons were doing amazing things, normally depicting scenes from the Bible and the scriptures. And were they painted? Like possibly the picture stones. That one's in the Heritage Park in Wexford. Jumping ahead 900 years or so to the Celtic Revival, Mary Watts designed everything in this amazing chapel in Surrey near Guildford. And if you ever drive that way for whatever reason, or you're in London, it's worth a drive out there to look at that. It's an amazing building. About 70 local people helped her with that, and it's covered in this kind of stuff. And the interior is just as elaborate, and it's still a working chapel. It's kind of a wonder of Celtic art. It needs to be. A lot of people don't really know about that. I didn't know. Like a buddy of mine in London said, "Have you seen this place?" And he was not into Celtic art. He just told me I should go and see it. And of course, George Bain, jumping ahead again, and that's a pretty sizable hunting rug, and I believe Stephen Walker has one of them in his shop. And again, lots of detail, hunting scenes, lots of storytelling going on there. How do I follow these people? You can't, can you? Like all the great Celtic artists. Early on, I was commissioned to do a little piece for a dissertation by a girl on Maui, a lady on Maui called Paula Noel. And she wanted her story in a clash of cultures. And so that's her at the top. And she's descended from the McPhee, well, she is a McPhee from the island of Colonsay in Scotland. And by folklore, they're descended from seal people. So there's a wee seal person down at the bottom there. But she also wanted some Hawaiian stuff in there. So we got the mo'o, or the lizard, and the honu, which is the turtle. And I was working in a dive shop at the time. I was a scuba diver for 10 years over there. And she wanted this clash of cultures, and she just kind of explained it to me verbally. And somehow I ended up doing the splayed cross and the Bridget's cross, speared by a sword and exploding in a lightning bolt. And that's just what came into my head. And didn't really speak to her about it much. When I showed her that in the dive shop, she screamed and dropped her backpack. And I was what have I done? What's going on? And she pulled out a little notebook, and the center part was almost identical. And we had not spoken about that at all, so I guess I was on the right path with that one. So part of my own story, my truck rolls around Maui, still does. It's in a bit of disrepair since that photograph, but and I was asked, the truck came first, and I was asked to do canvases of that, prints of it, which I couldn't until I put it down on a canvas, and I changed it very slightly, and the dragon's holding a crystal ball with a triskel in it, and I called it Guardian of the Goddess. So that's still there. And then I had to go at Hawaiian marine life, spurred on by 10 years of being a scuba instructor and seeing a lot of animals underwater every day, and also my entire adult life of surfing, about 40 years now. And so kind of free-form, modern kind of Celtic stuff, but it's all the Hawaiian marine life. And you got the Naia, which is the dolphin, Kahola, the whales, and even down to the reef, you've got the honu again, the turtle. You've got the haha'au, which is a manta ray. Kihi kihi is a Moorish idol. A little bit hard to see, but that's two different Celtic knots entwined in amongst all that. The puhi is the eel, mano, a shark. And my favourite one there, another two Celtic knots, a little bit difficult to see because of the colours. The humu humu nuku nuku apua'a, which is our state fish. It's called a triggerfish in nickname kind of thing. And in Hawaiian it means fish with a face like a pig, right? And when they repeat stuff twice in Hawaiian, like kihi kihi, it kind of means yellow or blonde. And if they repeat it twice, it means very much that. So, and humu humu, it means it's very much got a face like a pig. Right? That one's called Maui Celtic Ocean. Then the four seasons, the turning of the year in the ancient Celtic world: Samhain, Imbolc, Beltane, Samhain, Imbolc, Beltane, and Lunasa, in that order. And in the Celtic world, darkness preceded light, so the day started at sunset, and the season started with the dark season first. So at Samhain, now All Hallows Eve, Halloween, the Kaliach, the old woman of winter, bangs a stick on the ground and makes it hard for the winter season. The Kanunos, we saw him before, and the Gundestrup Cauldron, he's actually the gatekeeper for the other world, and he leads a thing called a wild hunt, which transports the departed souls to the other side, and where the wee folk or the she are. The summer season's gone, so the Morrigan kind of gives up her battle season and calms down for the winter, and hooks up with the good god. Excuse my pronunciation, Dagda, Daida. For some reason, he's always portrayed in mythology without pants on. I assume he's some kind of fertility god. The the Oak King gives up his kind of reign for the summer and hands it over to the Holly King for the winter. So all kinds of traditions there, with a lot of traditions of Halloween. If you dig into them, they can be pinned back to ancient Celtic traditions. The goddess Bridget Brige, Bridget's Day, also linked to Saint Bridget. So she would apparently touch her wand to the ground and make it light for the winter, and the Kaliach would have a rest. She was the goddess of childbirth, healing, the hearth, arts and inspiration, weaving, ale making, smithcraft, all kinds of stuff. And a lot of the traditions from her era came down to St. Bridget of Kildare, and became part of that story as well. And at the time, her sacred animal, the serpent, was popping its head out of a hole to see how the weather was like, and as with the badger was doing that as well. And that whole tradition, when the Celtic people went over to the Americas, the animal doing that in America was groundhog. So that actually kind of is the same day as Groundhog Day in America, interestingly enough. Beltane, or May Day, the sun god Bel. There's an ancient tree in Irish folklore called the Belia tree, and it spanned the three worlds: the sky world, the human world, and the other world, with some ancient traditions there. On the night of Beltane, they would light giant bonfires and walk between them and drive cattle between them to purify them and kind of bless them before they moved them to summer pastures. The only real tradition left for the Belia tree is the maypole. Originally it was just red and white ribbons for the god and the goddess. Now it's all kind of coloured ribbons. Fertility dance. So when parents are joyfully taking their kids to do maypole dances, do they actually know what they're getting involved in? And down in Cornwall, around about that time of year, we have a special thing called the obios, and that is also somewhat of a fertility dance. The biggest one is in Padstow in Cornwall, and there's a whole procession with music all around the town, and there's a few different instances of the obios traditions. One is also Midsummer's Day. In Scotland, there's the old tale of Thomas the Rhymer, who at a crossroads met the fairy queen, and I won't go into that, it's a very long story, but he's in there as well. And you hear a lot of songs about the May morning dew, and there's a tradition that if you wash your face in the May morning dew, or maybe might be good for artists or fishermen to wash their hands in the May morning dew before sunrise, then that keeps your hands working, keeps your beauty and all that kind of stuff for whoever wants to do that. And if you look in a dewdrop, it's always upside down, so I put a little she person in there, wee folk, looking in the dewdrop. Apparently a lot of the invasions of Ireland, the waves of invasions were on the night of Beltane, so I put that little thing up there. And there's a Welsh myth, folklore, about Llw, Lugh in Irish, L-U-G-H, L-L-E-W in the Welsh. And he didn't have a bride for whatever reason, so they made him a flower bride, who apparently cheated on him. He got into it with the fella, killed him, but he got speared at the same time. And I think his father turned him into an eagle and he managed to escape. And but he returned at some point to his flower maiden, Blodeuwedd, and changed her into an owl so that she was shunned by other birds and could only fly at night. So the story goes. And as far as I know, the Welsh word for an owl is Blodeuwedd, which means flower face. So that all kind of ties into that. And then you've got Lunasa, the binding duty of Lugh, and that was the sun god Lugh, one of the warriors of the Tuatha De Danann. It was foretold that he would kill his grandfather when he was born, so they fostered him out and took him out of the way so that that couldn't happen, and he was fostered off to Tailtiu, the goddess of agriculture, and Manannan Mac Lir on the Isle of Man. And apparently his foster mother was said to have cleared a giant forest in Ireland, and the effort of that killed her, brought around her demise. And on her deathbed, she supposedly said, if you hold funeral games in my honour, Ireland will never be without song. So apparently they did that, and that was the Tailchin Games, which, according to one thing I read, was about the size of the Olympic Games and lasted for hundreds of years, if not 1,000+ years. And I think it stopped, according to what I read, in the 1200s or something. But I was a little bit taken by that idea that there was something that huge going on, and it's largely been forgotten about. But I think they did have the Tailchin Games maybe before World War I. Can anybody else enlighten me on that? And then they stopped at some point. And they said that the line of chariots heading to those games was 10 days long. So a harvest festival, and they've got a cornucopia of stuff there, and some various traditions with some of the flowers, bilberry picking, and the various flowers at that time of year, and the Morrigans looking on there, everything, and people would sew corn dollies and put them maybe on the mantelpiece or somewhere in the house, and then sew them back into the fields the following year. So the spirit of the corn kind of lived on. Bit of a portrait I did of Bridget or Brige, the goddess of the hearth and the arts and inspiration. So the hearth I kind of put on her head, and the arts and inspiration, a bit of Latin kind of stuff flowing out there. Goddess of smithcraft, weaving, healing, and it was said she could throw her mantle over Ireland for protection. Sun god Bel, I've covered most of his stuff. He was venerated right across Europe. A hotbed of his stuff was in Austria, and I went to look at the Hallstatt and Hawaiian cultures. I actually went to look at Latin, but the late Harris Moore, who had a little museum down in Dingle, he encouraged me to go and look at the Hallstatt stuff as well. So a lot of the symbols I took off some actual artifacts of that era. And I wanted a bit of hatchwork from the back of one of the mirrors, one of the bronze mirrors. And I was searching through, actually, it's probably George Bain's book, for something that I liked the shapes of. And I rearranged them a little bit, but the one that I picked, when I actually bothered to look at which one it was and where it was from St. Keverne in Cornwall. And I'd spent 10 years taking people scuba diving out of that village, which was kind of interesting. And and then I suddenly realised that the ancient term for West Cornwall was Belerion, which actually meant the land of Bel. So a lot of stuff just fell into place right there. And then St. Patrick, I'm not going to go on too much about St. Patrick because there's so much information here, and I've learned an awful lot just being him myself. But I did take a different kind of take on what I wanted to do, and I'm going to have to read something. Just so that I can get it right. And a piece, I was reading part of Murtue's Life of St. Patrick, and one of the pieces was a supposed prophecy by some druids showing how Patrick was maybe seen by his opponents at that time that he was going to come up against. And it said, across the sea will come Ad's head, crazed in the head, his cloak with a hole for the head, his stick bent in the head. He'll chant impieties from a table in front of his house, and all his people will answer, so be it, so be it. So the Ad's head thing kind of interested me. So I guess really what I took from that was the little clerical tonsure. I may be completely off historically here, but this is an artistic representation. So one of the little tonsures that they had when they shaved their heads was this little tuft that looks like an adze at the front, so I decided I was going to do that. And behind him is the Paschal flame that he lit in the Hill of Slane, and at a time when there was no fires supposed to be going on, so that enraged King Lear and his druids. He sent out a bunch of guys to go after him, I think other people are going to talk about this. The lorica, the incantation, protection from God to protect him, the deer's cry, St. Patrick's breastplate, and that's the deer on there. And then the whole business about snakes. Apparently, according to folklore, he did come up against two beasts, an eel-like one called the coronach, and he banished that one to Loch Derg, or Red Lake, so that's reference to the blood of the beast. And a dragon-like Oilifeist, which was so angry when he turned up that it decided to leave Ireland, and by folklore tradition apparently smashed its tail on Ireland and created the course of the River Shannon. So that's him with his bell, which is still in the National Museum in Dublin, and the crozier, which was simple at the beginning, but later apparently encrusted with gold and jewels and stuff. And then, of course, the shamrock that he used to illustrate the Holy Trinity. From the radio interview I just did with the singer of the Irish Rovers a long time ago, it came to light that I could do a bit of Celtic art, and he asked me if I'd do an album cover. So fortunately, for the last 15 years, I've been doing all the work for the Irish Rovers. Local boys, originally from Belfast and Ballymena, they all left when they were kids and had a giant career in North America and beyond. They did come back, and they were on Ulster television for a long time with one TV series. But it's been interesting working with those guys. That's a stage backdrop I did for them, which is fabulous when you walk into a theatre and see that hanging behind them. And they asked me to do their 50th album cover. And I said, can you give me a brief on that? And he was, no, do what you like. Oh, okay, I'd rather a brief. So I didn't know what to do with that. So I thought, okay, the Irish Rovers, 50 years. And my wife famously said, do the Book of Kells. Really? A bit of a tall order. So I didn't know what to do with that. I sat and looked at a blank piece of paper for a couple of weeks, wrote a bullet list of their career and song titles and stuff, and then I couldn't come up with anything. I wrote out the words, the Irish Rovers, 50 years. I sat and looked at that for 2 weeks, couldn't come up with anything. And then finally I did come up with this. And nothing happened with this until I drew these two little heads here, because I was on a deadline and I still couldn't come up with anything. So I was, I've got to draw something. So I just drew George Miller meeting Jimmy Ferguson. That's their two faces. They met in 1963 in a little folk club and started singing together. And from that moment on, the whole thing just came out, and it was just non-stop for a couple of 100 hours until I got that done. And there's a lot of stories in there. They came from Ballymena, so the 7 towers of Ballymena, 4 churches, the castle of the Dare family, the town hall, and the spinning mill, connected to their father's accordion, which was their big influence. George was offered promised a pony when as a young lad he left Ireland, and he never got his pony, so I put that in there for him. That's them crossing the waves, a bunch of interlocked Triscolls over to Canada. Their big break was a cafe in Calgary called Phil's Pancake House. So there's a little stack of pancakes. That's the Rover record label dog, George's dog. The second break, you can hardly see it there, but there's a purple onion right there. That was in San Francisco. They had a big run of dates there. The biggest break was at the Pasadena Ice House in California, and Decca record label picked them up. That's the 60s colours of the Decca record label, D-E-C-C-A, which led to a load of singles and an album. This somewhat traditional looking piece of work, the key pattern, and that's actually a camera with a lens and the 2 reels on top. And they were on CBC in Canada, Global Television and Ulster Television for a total of about 13 years, which made them a household name on the other side. Showing my age here, Does anybody remember the Virginian TV series, the cowboy series? Okay, they were singing bank robbers in the Virginian. So some little spirals there. Looks like a gun, right? Because that's to represent them as singing bank robbers. A bunch of hits they had. The biggest one chased the Beatles up the charts in 1968, knocked it off the top, and they had a #1 and #2 in a lot of countries around the world. And that was the Unicorn Song. There were green alligators and long-necked geese, humpback camels and chimpanzees, cats, rats, and elephants. As sure as you're born, the loveliest of all was the unicorn. And they had another hit with the orange and the green. The B-side of that Unicorn Song, which sold a lot of copies, like millions at the time, the B-side was the Black Velvet Band. And obviously not their song, a traditional song, so her hair hung over her shoulder, tied up with a Black Velvet Band. They had a cover hit with Puff the Magic Dragon. They had another cover hit with Lily the Pink. They had, in the TV show, I was going through the Book of Kells looking for images to base stuff on, and there was 2 heads on fellas in the Book of Kells that looked exactly 100% like George and his brother Will. So I just thought I'd just go with those guys. In their TV series, they were sat on a toadstool. English fella, Ken Gibson, was a producer of a TV series, and he actually pioneered the use of green screen. So guys were flying up from Hollywood to Vancouver to look at the use of green screen, which was new. It was very crude. I mean, it had these fellas as leprechauns being picked up by a stork and dropped into a teacup and stuff like that. It's extremely crude stuff, but that made them a hit because the kids were watching with their parents, and now they have like 4 generations of people going to their concerts. They had a chain of pubs called the Rose and Crown and the Unicorn. They represented Canada. Although they're all Irish, these boys, they represented Canada in various expos. Their closing show, Stop Her Forever, has been the Drunken Sailor song. And they had a mad Christmas hit called Grandma Got Run Over by a Reindeer. And there's a few other things in there, but there's 26 references to their career and 11 song titles in that piece right there. I had to go a Titanic thing. George was born on the day of the sinking of the Titanic. It's always been on his mind. He wrote a fabulous song as a tribute to the Titanic, and he asked me to do a single cover for that. On Maui, Mick Fleetwood has a fabulous restaurant, a pub on Maui, and he has a rooftop bar that's open to the sunset. Straight view of the ocean, sunset in the winter, whales jumping around, and his management called me and said, we want a bagpiper every night at sunset. My first reaction was, why? Right? And you're going to drive people nuts. And I had been busking on the street actually playing the pipes, and I'd had the cops called on me a few times, so I didn't want to be that guy, right? But they took me down there and showed me the rooftop bar, and it was 3rd floor. The sound kind of dissipated and floated around. It wasn't annoying, so I took the job on. And I did that for about 5 years with 2 other guys, and then I just couldn't do it anymore because I was away too much. But he had an art gallery on the bottom floor, and my buddy ended up being the manager, and he's, get your stuff down here. And I was, well, do you need to ask Mick? And he was, nah, just get it down here. So we just hung it, and Mick walked in, and he loved it. So that worked out well. And but I ended up doing a piece for Mick. I read his biography, and which is crazy, as you would imagine. And so I did a piece that told his life story, really, with all little images. And the F is him as a young man about the Rumours album era. And it's got, so he was born in Cornwall, so it's the St. Brendan's flag right there. His mum was Scottish, and his dad was English, but he described him as an Irish storyteller. Both of them's middle name is Kells, and his dad was a RAF squadron leader, wing commander, so that represents that. His mum was Scottish, and her family was the Carr family, so that's the Carr tartan. And the big hit that I remember when I was a kid was a bluesy instrumental called the Albatross. So I put an albatross in there. And then a big breakthrough album he had was an album called The English Rose in America, and a little drum kit made of Celtic knots. And this is Mick today, and he always wears flamboyant, bright colours and a red neck scarf. And he's always been proud of his middle name and his Irish storyteller dad, so I put the colours in there. One of the last big pieces that I did was a fabulous poem by Alan C. Inman about music. And I am music, most ancient of the arts. I'm more than ancient, I'm eternal. Even before life commenced upon this earth, I was here, in the winds and the waves. When the first trees and flowers and grasses appeared, I was among them. And when man came, I at once became the most delicate, most subtle, and most powerful medium for the expression of man's emotions. When men were little better than beasts, I influenced them for their good. In all ages, I've inspired man with hope, kindled their love, given a voice to their joys, cheered them on to valorous deeds, and soothed them in times of... Can't read my own thing. Don't know. I've played a great part in the drama of life, whose end and purpose is the complete perfection of man's nature. Through my influence, human nature has been uplifted, sweetened, and refined. With the aid of men, I've become a fine art. From Tubal Cain to Thomas Edison, a long line of the brightest minds have devoted themselves to the perfection of instruments through which men may utilize my powers and enjoy my charms. I have myriads of voices and instruments. I'm in the hearts of all men and on their tongues. In all lands, among all peoples, the ignorant and unfettered know me, unlettered know me, not less than the rich and learned. For I speak to all men in a language that all understand. Even the deaf hear me if they listen to the voices of their own souls. I'm the food of love. I have taught men gentleness and peace, and I've led them onward to heroic deeds. I comfort the lonely, and I harmonize the discord of crowds. I am a necessary luxury to all men. I am music. It's one of the best things I've ever heard about music. And I was asked the commission to illuminate that for the singer of the Irish Rovers. He just had a little photocopy thing in his music room. And so I did that. And there's young George looking down on the whole thing, wondering what's about to happen. There's a muse there playing a harp. There's present day older George there. There's actually me playing the bagpipes and a buddy of mine playing the bodhrán. His wife asked me to do it in the colour palette of the ancient books, so I tried to stay true to that. And it was all hand-drawn and hand-done, hand-painted. And I struggled for a long time to find out any information on the guy that wrote that, Alan C. Inman. And my sister-in-law got onto it, and she found his gravestone in Massachusetts, his house in Massachusetts, but we couldn't link it directly. I wanted to know if it was public domain or not. And it had been painted on a cafeteria wall in a university in America. It had been performed 1,000 times on stages. And eventually we found a newspaper article from 1967 saying that he donated it to the American Music Publishing Association for the world to enjoy. So I felt good about that fact that it was in public domain right then. And I tried to contact anybody I could find under that name. I couldn't find his family. I couldn't find anything. A couple of years later, on Facebook, of all things, Rob Inman contacted me. And I was, I hope he's going to be okay with this. And he was just blown away. He loved it. And he said, he wanted to buy a couple. And I said, you know what? I've been looking for the family. I will send you a giant version of this, which I did. And then he bought a couple for his sons. So it was a fabulous circle to be connected with his descendants and be able to share that with them. And that's it, ending up with George Miller, and it's hanging up in his music room, all framed up now. And there we have it. Storytelling has always been there, and it's certainly been part of my life and all my artwork that I've done. So aloha, mahalo, thanks for having me.
Thank you very much, Hamish. A great tour through your inspirations in Celtic art and how you've developed your own storytelling from your experiences and the art that you love. So, what a great way to end the morning. We're going to then have some lunch now. And if you haven't been here, if you weren't here yesterday, we're up in the tea room, but right at the back, where your sandwiches are waiting. And I think there's tea and coffee today as well. As I mentioned earlier, at 1:40, so about half an hour, we're going to have the film about St. Patrick on here. So if you want to pop back in here, 12-minute film, find out, we'll see the new film about St. Patrick. It's about 12 minutes long. And then at 2 o'clock, we'll be hearing about David McGovern's Pictish art. And I think what we'll do, we'll have our questions for everybody after that. And that'll work out quite well. We allowed a little bit of time there. So we'll all get back here. Then we will walk up to the cathedral for about 3 o'clock. So maybe about 10 to 3, if all goes well. We'll leave the centre and walk up the same way as we did yesterday to the museum, but we're going to go left up the Mall and up to the cathedral, and we'll have a look at the two replica high crosses which are outside the cathedral, and then we'll have a tour by one of the guides in the cathedral, of the inside of the cathedral, which is lovely. It's got some stained glass windows, and it's got some Norman capitals, and there are early Christian artifacts in there. There's the font, which was the original base of one of the high crosses, and there's all kinds of things up there. So we'll have a nice afternoon up on the hill of Down, which gave its name to County Down. It's the Dune, the fort that then converted into a monastery when the king gave it to the church in about 750, and it gave its name to County Down. So this hill is where it all started. So it's a great place to explore, and don't forget also that we have our traditional music night tonight at 8:30. I know some of you are going to be having dinner here. You've booked it. I'm afraid it's all booked up now, but we're having dinner here about 7, and then there's a music night at Denver's at 8:30 in the back. And the Higgins family are going to be playing, and anybody who's got a musical instrument, please bring it along, because I'm sure there'll be a time to use it. And then on Sunday, don't forget that there's the tour if you're booked on 10 o'clock sharp. Probably come at 10 to 10 outside the St. Patrick Centre, because we're going off to look at some more sites. So that's all happening. Just a reminder anyway, enjoy your lunch, and do come back in to see the film, but certainly we'll see you at 2 o'clock. Okay?